lies. She sucks of them sweet birds' eggs to keep her voice clear. And the more she cries cuckoo, the summer draws near. Now walking and talking, a walking was I, to meet my own true love. She'll be there by and by. Down in yon meadows is my own heart's delight. I'll go walking and talking from morning till night. They say meeting is a pleasure, parting's a grief, and a false-hearted lover is worse than a thief. A thief, he will rob you of all that you have, but an unconstant lover will bring you to the grave. And the grave he will rot you, bring you to dust. There's not one in 20 young maids can you trust. They'll kiss you and they'll court you, your heart to deceive. There's not one in 20 young maids can you believe. So come all you loyal lovers, wherever you may be, and don't put your faith in the sycamore tree, for the top it will wither, the roots will decay, and the beauty of a fair maid will soon fade away. For the cuckoo is a pretty bird, she sings as she flies, she brings us good tidings, tells us no lies. She sucks them sweet birds' eggs for to keep her voice clear. And the more she cries cuckoo, well, the summer draws near. God bless you. And that was from a book called Southern Harvest, which most of you actually own looking around here at the moment. So what I'm going to do just very briefly is put into context Hammond and Gardner themselves, and also Frank Purslow. A few things you might not know, and then how the book came about. And it's an interesting story. Gardner and both Hammond and Gardner were influenced to a greater extent by Cecil Sharp. They both wanted to, and I quote, collect some of the gleanings from Mr. Sharp's harvest. In other words, go out and do some song collecting. Gardner did Hampshire. I know a lot of you know this already. And of course, Hammond and Gardner. Robert and Henry Hammond did the Dorset area, and a little bit outside as well, but mainly in Dorset. And I'll tell you a few things that might make you laugh a bit. Maybe Gardner was a very nice man. Although he didn't look it necessarily, he was a very tall man with excuse me, I've just got a warning on my thing here. My speaker is working. Can you hear me all right? No, I thought no.
It is a bit broken up, Nick.
Right. Oh, bugger it.
We can hear that.
You can you hear that now?
Yeah, you're fine now.
Yeah, we're fine now. Okay, it seems to mess about a little bit. Yes, he was a very tall man with dark wavy hair, big woolly moustache, and a frock coat. He was a slightly forbidding character, and on one particular occasion, he's doing it again. I've gone again. No, it's like Okay, look, tell me what to do. Okay, can you hear me now? Oh,
Only just.
right, here's what I'm going to do. Could I, at this point, hand over to, say, George, if he's there? Would you do us a song? And I'm going to log off and log on again. Is that okay? Can you hear me? No, okay, I'll get out.
Um, Hello everyone. Hopefully I'm not a robot as well. Um, so Nick asked me to sing a song from the book. If you don't all have a copy, then what you're playing at? Put it that way. It's a fantastic book, and I think everyone involved, Steve, Cohen, Nick, everyone else has done a fantastic job. So I'm going to sing you a song from it. And it's a song. If you has anybody got copies of the book with them now? So it's gonna be from page 74, which is The Mermaid, and I think it's a really nice tune, and I think the words are absolutely fantastic. I love the kind of sense of this mystical creature who is benevolent. But so here is The Mermaid from page 74. As I lay on my bed asleep, sleeping warm and at my ease, I dreamed about poor mariners, poor sailors on the seas. They do endure both hot and cold, and many's the bitter blast, and oftentimes they are obliged to cut away the mast. Our captain at the wheel he stands, clearing his course well, and looking round with watery eyes. Good Lord, how the seas do swell. Our plumber on the deck he stands, with a leaden line in his hands, to see how far and near we are from any rocks and sands. Oh, then overboard their guns they threw, and many's the cargo brave, in their longboats obliged to sail, their precious lives to save. Oh, the mermaid on the rocks she sat, with a comb and glass in her hand. Steer off, you bold mariners, you are not far from land. cheer up, you bold mariners. Don't perish in the deep. For this I do for poor sailors' sake, a losing of my sleep. Cheer up, you bold mariners. Don't let your courage fail. For if you sail this way again, it's here you'll find me still.
Lovely. Right, I'm hoping you can hear me now. Okay.
Yeah, you're fine now.
Good, lovely. I've actually reduced my volume in my speakers through it, so maybe it make a difference or not. Let's hope it stays. So I was just talking. First, I want to talk about that last song, actually, "The Mermaid." It's wonderful. I do believe Brian Peters uses a very similar tune, which came from the Gardner manuscripts, and that was for the Turtle Dove. I was quite surprised to hear him do it because I didn't know the tune had travelled out to Dorset, but it did. That came from Joseph Elliott of Tudborough. He was once upon a time he was a fisherman on the bitter cod banks right out in Newfoundland, and picked up a few songs out there. As Steve Gardner found that there were only versions that were available were found in Newfoundland, and he couldn't figure out how on earth it came into the repertoire of an ex-fisherman in Dorset. He returned to agricultural labouring. He lived in Shave Lane in Tudborough. He remembered in the 1980s as being a very rough old man who was quite friendly for all of that, but he had no money towards the end of his life. He had to sell all his old Victorian china that him and his wife had collected just to make ends meet. And they were the sort of people I was beginning to talk about before technology overtook me. And that was when Gardner went collecting, and what an imposing figure he was. He knocked on the door of one old lady whose name escapes me, and asked if he said he knew that she was a singer, and asked would she please sing him some of her old songs. And she looked at this imposing man with his Edwardian moustache and his frock coat, and decided that he wasn't a song collector at all. He was, in fact, a murderer. Whereupon she hurtled up her stairs, leapt into bed, and pulled the covers over her head. So Gardner was a bit bemused by this and wondered what on earth he could do. So he went to the local shop and bought a quarter of a pound of mince. He couldn't make this up, he really couldn't. And then went back to the cottage, and the door was still open, and he sort of crept in and went up the stairs and said, "I'm really not a murderer, I'm just looking for old-fashioned songs." Well, she still didn't believe him, and thought, well, he's a murderer that wants songs. So she stuck her head out of the bed, out of the covers on the bed, and rattled off 2 verses of the Duke of Marlborough at great speed, then stuck her head back under again. And there's no way he could have collected the song. So eventually he got one of these mints and stuck it under the covers and tempted her out, a bit like bringing a poodle to orchard. And eventually they became great friends, and sat down in the kitchen and sucking mints, and he was busy collecting songs. And another thing that Gardner did and did on that particular occasion was, when he collected songs, he only took down the words, and that was because he didn't trust himself to write down the tunes, and he worked with 2 or 3 other musicians, but they were actually working 2 weeks behind him. So in a lot of cases, the singer, on one occasion, I'm not laughing, it's not funny, but one of the singers had actually died in the interval between when he took down the words and when the musicians came to write down the tunes. A lot of times you just find in the Gardner manuscripts, "singer gone" written in there. But I can imagine the conversation around the breakfast table on a Monday morning. Does anybody know where he went last Friday? And so they attempted to track down the singers. A bit of a hit and miss way of collecting folk songs, unfortunately. The Hammond brothers were a bit more, how can I say, they were a little bit more organised, but Henry did not trust himself to write down the tunes and work with one of Gardner's musicians, Gamblin, I believe his name was. I've probably got that wrong. Anyway, eventually, with Lucy Broadwood's encouragement, he did trust himself to take down the tunes. And I was going to say unfortunately, but I'm not sure it is unfortunate. They didn't have too many of the prejudices that we talk about regularly with the likes of Cecil Sharp and George Gardner and all the other collectors, in as much as they, when they started, they decided, well, you know, we only want the songs that we consider to be folk songs, and if the broadsheet was on sale up the road, understandably, unless the tune was of any worth in their estimation, they wouldn't take the song down. But the Hammonds weren't like that at first. They just took absolutely everything down. They eventually learned that prejudice, I think, from Lucy Broadwood and also from Gardner and Cecil Sharp, who was involved in assessing their collection and realised, well, perhaps we shouldn't have collected that one. So the early collection in 1905 in the Hammond manuscripts has got quite a few oddities in it that other collectors wouldn't have written down, some of which found their way into the first publication from the Gardner manuscript, Hammond and Gardner manuscripts, and that, of course, was Marrowbones, which we're all familiar with. Songs like an SONG was one, and various other ones that are sort of Glee Club songs like. Forget, so I'll think of it when this is all finished. But the one about discontent with marriage, I'll look it up in a minute. Anyway, and also they noted down songs from the singers who were obviously giving them songs that they thought they might like to hear. I think it was William Bartlett gave a lot of songs that were obviously composed. That's not to say they were in any way worthless. Nowadays, the collectors still working in the field, wherever they're working, will actually note every single song that a singer wishes to sing and leave value judgments out of it to a greater or lesser degree. But on a more peculiar, if you like, side of the Hammonds, they actually collected songs that were really quite downright obscene. And I mean that even by modern day standards. There's a couple of songs tucked away in Hammond, which I couldn't, you wouldn't want to sing in a folk club because they were apart from the political correctness of, or should I say, incorrectness of them. Also, I mean, it's just a subject you just wouldn't want to sing about. And they're not like rugby songs. They're slightly worse, in fact. And they noted them down word for word, which is amazing from two Edwardian gentlemen who had all the Edwardian views towards overt sexuality of any sort. However, don't want to dwell on it for too much because I want to just quickly have a word about Frank Purslow, who came in for a lot of criticism, most of which was fairly unwarranted. When he started work on Marrowbones, he had the Hammond and Gardner manuscripts had, or rather notebooks, had been inherited from Ursula Vaughan Williams, I believe, and given to the Vaughan Williams Memorial Library. He took them home. He was working as an accountant in London at the time, and he started work on Marrowbones in 1959. And it is a seminal book, and it was necessary to have it republished. In its day, there are a lot of things right with the original Marrowbones, but there's an awful lot of things wrong, most of which were not anything to do with Frank Purslow. He had, I was going to say, personal troubles. It's going to sound a bit weird, but his sexuality in 1959 was a problem. If you see what I mean, he was gay, and at any moment he could have been arrested for living what it was a totally normal life. He had all that pressure on him, and on top of that, he had to to earn a living while he was bringing these books together. And I don't know whether it's none of our business whether he was ever paid for doing those 4 books that have inspired so many singers. But when it came to Marrowbones, Peter Kennedy wrote a few notes on a piece of paper, which were supposed to be that notes for further investigation of the songs of the book. Somehow or other, those notes ended up being published without Kennedy's permission or Frank Perslow's permission. And the other good one, is The Unfortunate Tailor. In those days, you didn't have a computer to do all the cutting and pasting for you when you were getting a copy up for print. You had to do it by hand. And the story is that when The Unfortunate Tailor was being pasted up, somebody had a window open and it blew all the bits of paper on the floor. They were then repasted with all the verses in the wrong order in Marrowbones. And that's still there to look at today. That's of course been corrected in the republished volume. But Marrowbones itself, I don't know whose idea it was to. Now here's her name. What's in Mary McGee? There she is, and she did all those little drawings. It was obviously to her just another job. She's a children's illustrator, as you can see by some of the quality of the drawings inside, or shall I say the illustrations inside the book. I don't know whose idea it was to include that, but realistically it sort of treated the volume as if it wasn't really that important, you know what I mean? It was just something might help sell a few copies because nobody's going to be really interested. That's how it comes across. And of course nothing could be further from the truth, because some of the songs in this little book here have really gone round the world and have actually crossed over into a whole different area of I say folk music. It wasn't really folk music. The song that springs to mind is I Live Not Where I Love, sung by Robert Barrett to the Hammond Brothers. He sang 86 songs. He was a master carter and a very, very clever man, a very, very skilled man. But when he sang 86 songs to the Hammond Brothers, he had throat cancer, and he could only just about whisper the songs. And he whispered I Live Not Where I Love, along with a lot of other brilliant songs that we know that were published in various different books he's cropped up. He's now Robert Barrett, Puddletown. And I was wandering through a Fleetwood Market. To my delight, I heard I Live Not Where I Love, sung by an Irish country and western band, complete with pedal steel guitar and drum kit and keyboards. And of course this had been taken from the Fury Brothers, who released an LP called I Live Not Where I Love. So that little book had far-reaching effects on different forms of music. And as you can tell by this spine, plastic spine that I've got down here, those bloody books fell apart just as quick as you actually opened them up. And if you could, I don't know how many copies actually survive still of this and of the other books too. They've all got sellotape round them and have been well thumbed. But they are a testament to Frank Purslow and his efforts. Firstly, actually numbering the songs and getting them in order, actually matching up the words with the songs, because the Hammond manuscripts, which I'm more expert at than Gardner, I've actually held them in my hands, and they are notebooks, not like Sharp's magnificent big fair copies, huge tomes with his writing in. They are just little notebooks with marbled covers. Do you remember those sort of notebooks, you know, with the cloth-bound spine and marble on the covers? And one has the tunes in and one has the words in, and none of it is really legible. As you can see from the full English, you really have to struggle to read the handwriting. On the full English, of course, you can blow it up the size of your screen. Poor old Frank Purslow was there with a magnifying glass trying to sort this out, which he did an exemplary job on it, he really did. And he was taken to task right, left and centre, which is unfortunate. And when I was asked by Steve Gardam and also Ronde, and Clive Bootle, who was responsible for republishing the Wanton Seed and the Southern Harvest, to do the introduction to the Southern Harvest Omnibus, which was the last two Purslow books republished. I suggested in that introduction that there might be enough songs in the Hammond and Gardner manuscripts for another volume, and Clive Bootle, God bless him, was quite keen on that idea, and Steve Gardam knocked me into shape. That man, I know he's listening right now, so thank you, Steve. I would not have been able to begin to do it without Cohen, who did all the notation, and Steve, who knocked me into shape and actually got any ideas I had about songs and how to do them and how to present them, and taught me more than anybody has ever taught me about anything at all when it comes to song notation and song presentation. We managed to get the volume together, and it's been out now about the best part of a year, I guess. But what I will say, I had a couple of ideas, which brings me to Cohen, if that's okay. If you got the right box to sing the song that's best known at the moment by Nick Jones, you know the one I mean? He's nodding his head, I think, yes. Just warning you if you get that box for us, Cohen. I decided to put a few songs that were well known in other versions, but one in particular, and that's Kennedy I.O., and I did that for a reason. Nick Jones got his version of Kennedy I.O. from Harry Upton, and that was the Mike Yates recordings. And now, no disrespect to Nick Jones, because he didn't intend it, it killed the song stone dead. Why? Because he had did such a fabulous job of the accompaniment, and he did, that nowadays everybody thinks Nick Jones as soon as somebody says Kennedy I.O. And it's become it's become a piece of exemplary guitar playing with a song attached to it. I mean, put it like this: if Nick Jones had done that unaccompanied as Harry Upton, would anybody have taken any notice of it? Answer no. Would Bob Dylan have recorded it? No. So I thought what it's effectively done is killed it's stone dead from the traditional currency. So I thought, what I'll do is put another version in the book to see what happens. Well, what happened is, completely independently of anything I thought, Cohen, God bless him, took up the song, realised, if you like, what he was up against, and came up with what I consider to be an excellent version. And with your permission now, Peter, I'd just like to hand over to Cohen so he can do Kennedy I.O. Is that okay?
Yeah. So, I suppose I came from a similar viewpoint as Nick. Obviously I've known that seminal Nick Jones version for years, and I wanted to make it as un-Nick Jones as possible. So instead of doing this beautiful guitar accompaniment, I've pulled out my 1930s Hohner melodeon and done a very tasteless melodeon accompaniment. So very un-Nick Jones. So yes, this is Canada I.O. And Nick probably knows more than me about the source. So, do you want to talk about that after?
I'll just have to get the book out.
Oh, okay. I'll sing the song and then we'll talk about the source. Is that sounding all right? Yeah. It's for the gallant lady, all in her tender youth. She dearly loved to sailor, she loved him so in truth. And for to go to sea with him away she did not know. She longed to see that pretty place called Canada I.O. Called Canada I.O. Called Canada I.O. She longed to see that pretty place called Canada I.O. So she bargained with the sailor all for a purse of gold. Then straight away he took her and hid her in the hold. Said, we'll dress you up in sailor's clothes, no one shall you know. You will see that pretty place called Canada, called Canada, called Canada, and you will see that pretty place called Canada. So soon as her lover heard of this, he fell into a rage. Then with the whole ship's company he was willing to engage. Said, well, tie your hands and feet, me love, and overboard you'll go. You'll never see that pretty place called Canada, called Canada, called Canada, and you'll never see that pretty place called Canada. So she stepped up to the captain and unto him did say, here's 500 guineas, all unto you I'll pay. If you will spare me life, sir, and let me with you go, until we reach that pretty place called Canada, called Canada, called Canada, until we reach that pretty place called Canada. Something up spoke the captain, for a gallant man was he. He says, if you drown this fair maid, I'll hang it you shall be. So I'll dress her up in sailor's clothes, with us she will go, until we reach that pretty place called Canada, called Canada, called Canada, until we reach that pretty place called Canada. Well, they've not been in Canada but the space of half a year, before the captain's married her and called her his own dear. She's dressed in silks and satins now, and she cuts a gallant show. She's one of the finest ladies down in Canada, in Canada, in Canada, and she's one of the finest ladies down in Canada. So come all of you young fair maids, wherever that you be, and follow up your own true love when he's found a way to sea. For if he do prove false to you, the captain won't do so, and you'll be a captain's lady down in Canada, in Canada, in Canada, and you'll be a captain's lady down in Canada, in Canada, in Canada, and you'll be a captain's lady down in Canada.
Excellent.
Lovely.
So now we've got two seminal versions of Canada I.O. Absolutely
Very
lovely.
kind.
It's from the Gardener. I knew it's from Gardner, but I've had to look it up. It's from Mrs. Davy, and also the stanzas 1 to 3 and 7 are from Richard Moore, Hampshire. And Steve Gardner has, as ever, done an extensive list of notes at the end of the book, and there's a page and a half on Canada I.O. I'll just simply say that. I'll just read the first line of this, and it says, "The earliest version of this ballad that I have seen is Fair Isabel's Garland, printed at Alnwick in 1792 to 93." So there you go. And on those notes go, and it's as much as anybody could ask for, and it's a testament to Steve Gardner's knowledge. It really is. The tune itself, I thought, sounded a little bit like the banks of Sweet Dundee, but it's in the same sort of mould as that. Tunes are something I'm still learning about. There really are tunes and tune families, and I'm not really in a position to. You can't hear me. Okay, it's done there.
I'm sure you realise you've got connection troubles.
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me at all? No. Okay.
Yes.
Right, I tell you what, could maybe George or Cohen or do another song, and I'll rejoin again like I did before. Is that okay?
Cohen? I can do something if you don't have anything ready, Cohen. I'll do something unaccompanied this time then. So, for those of you singing along at home, page 100. I feel like I'm in church announcing the hymns. Page 100, and this is a song called "The Rose of the Vale." Come, all you good people that dwell far and near, unto my misfortune I pray lend an ear. I was courted by young Edwin, of him I'll tell my tale. In this fate was poor Rosa, the pride of the vale. Now Edwin was wealthy, my parents were poor. My father forbid him to enter our door. But for many a long evening, o'er hill, plain, and dale, young Edwin he rambled with the pride of the vale. Now we lived in splendor for 9 months or more. But at last cruel Edwin turned me from the door. Now I was left to wonder, no friend to tell my tale. In this fate was poor Rosa, the pride of the vale. Now I returned home with my baby quite young, And I found not my mother, she was dead and gone. My father always shunned me with looks deadly pale. There is no one to comfort the pride of the vale. So she kissed her baby's lips and laid it by her side. She breathed a prayer to heaven and lay down and died, saying, all you good people, take a warning by this tale, and remember the fate of the pride of the vale. And if any of you are taking notes, you'll notice that I didn't quite sing the words that were written in the book, because when this book first landed through my letterbox, I had a look through it and looked through the songs, and that song really fascinated me, so I kind of looked it up, and I found a broadside ballad that had more verses than that, and kind of fleshed out the story a bit. So what you heard then, if there were any bits that didn't quite match up, that was from the broadside ballad, which I found. But yes, so yeah, a really lovely song, that, and I think the tune is really interesting. I'm sure Cohen will have something to say about that potentially. But yeah.
Just checking. Can you actually hear me now?
Yeah.
Right, lovely. That you just said something, George, which is something that not only I had in mind when I put the book together, but also Frank Purslow always said, view the songs as raw material in many respects and do your own version. And Frank Purslow's words were, some judicious pruning and rewriting is always encouraged. And so I think that's great, because I don't believe that a parrot fashion copying of singers, or even of other singers' words is necessary at all. So well done. I only caught the end of that, unfortunately. When I left, Zoom decided to update itself without my permission. But if it means that I can carry on talking for a little bit, then that's okay. I've lost my thread a bit, to be honest. Oh yes, I would like to just tell you a couple of eye openers that came my way, and I won't dwell too much on them, because I want to ask your opinion on it, to be perfectly honest. The first one, there is a Scottish connection to both the Hammond and Gardner manuscripts, very much the Hammond manuscripts. If you remember Marrowbones, there were some outright Scottish songs in there that you'll know, like John Blunt, yeah, the barring of the door, the Brewer Laddie, which appears in most Scots connections, and it was first spotted by Anne Gilchrist, who wrote to no, she didn't. She did write to Henry Hammond. What she did, she published in the 1907 Folk Song Journal that she couldn't quite understand why songs from Banffshire and Aberdeenshire that were found nowhere else outside Banffshire and Aberdeenshire appeared to be found in the middle of Dorset. And she couldn't understand this at all. Henry Hammond couldn't either. And I'd love to say I did the research, but I didn't. A gentleman by the name of Nigel Cantor, who lives down in Weymouth, who's a great tunesmith and is familiar with the Hardy tune manuscripts, or the Hardy family tune manuscripts, said there's a loads of Scots stuff in the Hardy tune manuscripts as well. He said, I don't know if you knew this, Nick, but Scots regiments were posted all along the south coast. So I double-checked with the advice of Steve Gardam, and found that, in fact, Aberdeenshire, a Scottish regiment, was in fact posted in 1885 in Portland. Now, the only way to get from Weymouth to Portland is to march. There's no the railway stops at Weymouth, so you can imagine the effect on the locals when, in full regalia, a Scottish regiment marched across to up to Portland Barracks. And as a result of that, the soldiers met up with the locals in the pubs and swapped songs. That's my theory, anyway. John Waltham, God love him, has other ideas, but I think that is probably the most likely source of all these Scots songs suddenly turning up in Aberdeenshire songs, in fact, turning up in Dorset. It's probably the best one. When I was collecting down there with Mally, I collected a number of songs from Bill House, son of one of Hammond's informants, and there were a lot of Scots songs in his repertoire, including a version of Jock Stewart, which you've probably heard me sing if you've seen me do a gig. It's called The Man You Don't Meet Every Day. Now that brings me to the second eye opener, and this I haven't solved, and and it's going to involve me singing as well. I'd really like your opinion on this, because I'm still trying to figure out why. When the Hammond brothers visited Bill House's dad, George House, he was a hurdle maker in Thatcher, fairly young man at the time, 35 when Robert and Henry Hammond visited him in Bempster, just north of Bridport. And he sang a number of songs which had his own, well, I say his own, he had a rather interesting singing style. The end of the song was modulated into the major, or if you prefer, the Ionian scale, which threw the Hammonds completely, because they thought he had, and I quote, spoiled his tunes by changing the mode at the end of each song. And so the majority of the songs where he did this quite drastically, Henry Hammond destroyed them, ripped them up. So I've got a little bit of news on it, but first what I'm going to do is sing the version of One Night as I Lay on My Bed that has that little ending to it, and you'll see what I mean. And then just briefly, very briefly, because I don't want to go on forever, sort of show you that it may be an interesting form of singing style that we don't know about. So I'll just have a drink of horrible diet lemonade. Tell you what, for reasons of brevity, I'll just sing the first two verses, because you know the song. One night as I lay on my bed, I dreamed about a pretty maid. I was so distressed I could take no rest. Love did torment me so, and away to my true love I did go. When I came to my love's window, I vow I called her then by her name, saying for your sweet sake I've come here so late, through this bitter frost and snow. So it's open the window, my love do. So you can see what I mean. That last note is a bit of a surprise. It's like it doesn't resolve itself. And I'm going to put a theory to you, which I'm quite prepared to be argued out of. But then lo and behold, I found it in various other songs, which I'll come to. Firstly, George House sang Sweet Kitty, and to, I quote the Hammonds, the usual tune, but then he went into the major at the end. But they ripped it up. But thanks to the Roud Index, I found out that Cecil Sharp had collected the song 10 miles up the road from Bempster from another singer, who incidentally worked in wood. He was a carter and also a hurdle maker. Very likely knew George House, and at the end of the tune he goes straight up the major scale. So if I just sing the tune to you, and the chorus is Fal-de-riddle-i-do, fal-de-riddle-i-do, sing fal-de all day. That's how Mrs. Overd sang it. This gentleman sang it like this. So me fal-de-riddle-i-do, fal-de-riddle-i-do, sing fal-de all day. which I think is quite pleasant. Now, Cecilia Costello at the end of The Grey Cock, although Bert Lloyd corrected it, in inverted commas, for the Penguin Book of English Folk Songs, the first, Songs for Singing Penguin one, she does much the same. I want to get the tune together again, but we take me word for it. She actually finishes on the major. And I thought, well, there's three singers. Does it mean anything? And then lo and behold, I found it happening again with the inmate of a workhouse, Mr. William Smith, who sang the Lakes of Culfin and finished it once again in the major. Now, the only thing I can think about with all this, and I'm certainly prepared to be persuaded out of it, is that it does actually say musically, there's more coming. It doesn't resolve. It's a bit like a guitarist or any musician finishing a tune on a seventh. It needs to be resolved. It needs to da 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 da. It's got to go somewhere. So it's actually creating a sort of musical tension, saying there's more to come in the song. Therefore, at the end of the One Night As I Lie on My Bed, and what we did there, no need to declare, for all men should know, I love her still, while I have breath to draw. So what happened then? That's the only thing I can come up with. It's pretty spurious, to be honest. But is it, I think, an Irish, possibly Irish style of singing for somebody who's not too familiar with harmony? But even that falls down because there was a lot of harmonic music around, church music and things like that. So there it is. It's a discovery. It's not wildly important, but I would love if anybody has got an opinion on it, then fine. I'll just do a little bit more about the book, just where you can get it from, of course, Clive Bootle, from the Granny's Attic website. That's one way. Or if you get in contact with me, and I'm going to put my email address on chat. You can get it from me, and I'll also send you the tunes by MP3, and so you don't have to read music. You can have the tunes if you haven't already got the book. Gardner collected a lot of shanties as well, which have never been published, and so while I actually give you my email address, Cohen, I'm sorry to spring this on you. Can you do a shanty from the book? Is that okay? All right. Hang on, he's having a brew. You see, things have changed. In my day, it would have been a double whiskey. So I'll hand over to Cohen, and he'll tell you about the shanty, and I'll just give you my my email address.
So the shanty that I'm going to do, it's a long time ago, page 136, following George's church style. Comes from James Bounds of Portsmouth, and I believe all of the shanties from the Southern Songster book come from that same singer. And George and I, we were asked to do a workshop last year in Germany, and we decided to pick out a couple of simple songs that we could sort of teach them in a second language, and this was one of them. So there's a cohort of German folk song enthusiasts singing this song out there, which I think is rather nice. So yes, this is A Long Time Ago. Time, a very long time to be away, hey, hey, a long time and a very long time ago, in Portsmouth town where I was born to be away, hey, hey, in Portsmouth town where I was born a long time ago. It's there I joined the boys in blue to be away, hey, hey. It's there I joined the boys in blue a long time ago. In Portsmouth town there lived a girl to me way. Hey, hey. In Portsmouth town there lived a girl a long time ago. And this young girl I loved her so well to me way. Hey, hey. This young girl I loved her so well a long time ago. It was through her I first went to sea to me way. Hey, hey. It was through her I first went to sea a long time ago. So I sailed away from Portsmouth town to me way. Hey, hey. We sailed away from Portsmouth town a long time ago. To Hong Kong town where we was bound to me way. Hey, hey. To Hong Kong town where we was bound a long time ago. So goodbye Sally, goodbye me dear to me way. Hey, hey. Goodbye Sally, goodbye me dear, a long time ago. A long time and a very long time to me way. Hey, hey. A long time and a very long time, a long time ago.
Well done. We were asked if Brian was doing anything. He hadn't arranged to do anything. Thanks, Cohen. Sorry. He's got to go to the traditional song forum along with a couple of other people as well. It starts at 4 o'clock, and it's now a couple of minutes past. And it's just the way it happens. It's things clash together. So anyway, I think I've covered most things. What I would like to do, if Peter can unmute us all, is just so if anybody got any ideas, any questions at all, then I'll do my best to answer them.
We've been as we're sort of being paid up now. Oh no.
I can't unmute you all. You have to unmute yourselves if you want
All
to say
right.
something.
Well, if anybody's got anything to ask, then unmute and ask, please. We are slowly shrinking in
I've got a
numbers.
question.
Yeah, George.
So how many songs, how much of this collection has been covered, has been published now, would you say? How much is remaining? How much quality is left in the collection that has not been put out in the world?
Yeah.
Basically, is there going to be another volume?
The answer is probably not from me. But George, can you just mute yourself a second? Thank you. Probably not from me. I'm getting an echo from somewhere. That's better, yeah. I do believe there is a total of 2,400 songs in the collection. So really, with all 5 books, we haven't even begun to cover all the versions that are there. However, Frank Purslow said that he wasn't going to do any more from the Hammond and Gardner manuscripts because he believed they were all well-known versions or too long to put in a book the size of what I just showed you. So consequently, he decided not to do. There are a considerable number of unpublished songs there, but there are other books coming out. Now, I do believe that Bob Askew is doing something on the Gardner. I have to explain, Gardner has by far the most songs collected. I think it was in excess of 800 or 900, or maybe more, up to 1,000 songs, whereas Hammond and Gardner is a smaller county, Dorset, got a 650, I believe it was, maybe 700 songs. And the fact is, okay, we've already done the Cuckoo, and I've repeated it, but there are about another 5 or 6 versions of the Cuckoo. Is there any point in publishing them all? Probably not. I think it was a justification for one more volume, bearing in mind it has to be. I mean, this isn't a money making. Nothing in folk is money making, is it? Let's be honest. It's all about doing it for the love of it. And if you want to make money, go down the pub and sing country and western. And effectively, it's a case of, does Clive Bootle want to risk a more money on yet another volume? Are we overcrowding the market? I've had an idea being kicked around with me and myself and Tim Radford on the subject of, well, could we possibly get all the songs that me and Mally collected from different sources and do a book of that? And Clive was quite interested in that. So the answer to your question is not from me, but that's no reason to say that there won't be more people dipping into the collection and coming up with songs from it. I do think that I would never have been able to do the job that this book without Steve Gardam, and you need somebody like Steve Gardam to guide you through it. And to do a book that's going to be taken seriously and it's going to be a reference book. So I mean, no disrespect to Bob Askew, but he approached me and said he didn't want me to do this book because he believed that the Gardner manuscripts were something he wanted to do and all the rest of it. So we agreed to differ on it. So that's where we're at the moment. I want to see what Bob Askew does. If he doesn't do anything, or I might, well, if somebody said, well, come on, Nick, get off your backside and do something, I might well do. But that's where I'm at the moment for an answer. And you will find lots of versions of songs that are in those books that aren't sung, and that's not a bad thing. And a Roud index is a wonderful thing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Nick.
Yeah. Right, anybody else have got anything on their mind at all? Nobody? Well, in which case then we'll grind to a shivering halt. What I want to do is to say thank you very much to Cohen and thank you very much to George and all the rest of you for taking interest. And if you can, anything you want, you get on to me via my email. If you wish to get the tunes downloaded to you, you can have them. Even if you've got the book already, and I'll just send them by WeTransfer. And also, while we're on the subject, if you've lost your copies, original copies of the other 4 books have disappeared, I have permission now from Clive Bootle and also from the English Folk Dance and Song Society to sell the PDFs of everything. We don't own the copyright to Marrowbones, but the other books you can have in PDF form with the tunes as well. And that's just 20 quid, which I'm sure goes basically back to the EFDSS. So that's via Clive Bootle. So that's a PDF copies, and I'll just send them over by WeTransfer. And that's of the Wanton Seed, the Constant Lovers, and the Foggy Dew, which is now, of course, known as Southern Harvest. So that's something else for you to consider as well. So I'll hand over to Peter now. If there's anything that you need to say that I haven't said.
I'm going to jump in instead of Peter.
Oh, you're going to jump in into the piece, okay.
A big thanks, Nick. That was really interesting. Coming from a non-singer, and I found it fascinating, it's got to be a compliment. And I'm sitting here in the warmth of my own home instead of sitting in the chilly church hall in Tenterden where we would normally be holding these sort of workshops. So Zoom does actually have some advantages.
Yes,
not many, but a few. Really great, really interesting. I'd like to reiterate and say thanks to Cohen and George for coming along as well. And thank you for everybody who's taken part in all the events and attended over the weekend. It's been really, really good. One thing I'd just like to add, or a couple of things I'd like to add at the end. This has gone out live on Facebook, as most of you realise. So if you want to catch up on bits you missed out on, go back to Facebook and pick it up there before it disappears. If you don't do Facebook, we've actually been recording it. And I hope that Nick and Cohen and George are actually going to let us top and tail the recording and put it up with all the concerts that we've been doing over the weekend. So
well, it's all right with me.
Yeah,
How
if
do you
the other two
do
are happy, we'll
Yeah.
do that. And
Fine with me,
if you go to our website, you'll find where it's lurking, so you can have a listen to it again as well.